All right. Welcome back to another episode of Finding Her Voice, a podcast for women who love film about the women who make film. This month, we are talking about horror, a genre we've covered in the past, but one always worth revisiting. For this episode, we watched Anna Biller's 2016 The Love Witch, a wickedly funny take on the genre. In the film, it focuses on Elaine, a beautiful young witch who is determined to find a man to love her. In her gothic Victorian apartment, she makes spells and potions, then picks up men and seduces them. However, her spells work too well, and she ends up with a string of hapless victims. When she at last meets the man of her dreams, her desperation to be loved drives her to the brink of insanity and murder. So it was just a treat and not at all what I was expecting. As always, I am joined by entertainment writer AJ, and this month fellow writer and film critic Yasmin joins us as a horror enthusiast. So we have a good scale of who can and cannot handle horror, with Yasmin being at the top, I imagine, and me being way below at the bottom. Before we get started, though, I wanted to start with an opening question, kind of out of my own curiosity, which is, what is the scariest film you've ever seen? And it doesn't have to be directed by a woman.
Oh, man.
Yeah, Yasmin, I feel like your bar might be set higher. So maybe.
Yeah. Okay, should I go first? Should I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The scariest film I've seen is called I Saw the Devil. It's a Korean horror film, and it is very hard to watch. I can really only watch it once. Like, it's kind of about like this guy, he's kind of like a secret agent, and this serial killer like murdered his wife and he wants to go avenge her, so on and so forth. And it's just like, the violence is just so crazy that it's just kind of like really hard to watch, like as a woman, because, the women aren't really treated very nicely in this film. But also you just can't help but be engaged in it, because just this obsessive game of cat and mouse is just so intriguing to watch. You like can't really take your eyes off of it. But it's a movie I can only watch once because of the violence against women in it, unfortunately.
Ugh. Yeah, I feel like that's Korean horror films kind of set the bar of like violence and like just how scary the genre can be really high. And it's definitely I haven't really explored it much, but even the lighter films from that area still scare me.
No, they don't screw around. Like
No. And they make it emotional too. So like you care while you're being terrified.
Exactly. Like Train to Busan does that.
Oh,
and
I
sure love Train to Busan. And I'm like scared, but I'm also crying at the same time.
Right? Oh, so good. AJ, how about you?
Mine is such a wimpy answer compared to that.
No, just wait.
It's okay, y'all. I'm an exception. It's okay.
So yeah, like I like horror movies. I just need to preface this. Like I do like horror movies. Raw, The Invitation, even like Green Room. I'm good with gore and everything. But legitimately scary movies, I don't do that well with, and I'm not good with like possessions and paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
But The Others got me really spooked. I saw it a couple of years ago. It's with Nicole Kidman. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why it scared me as much as it did is because there's not like jump scares or like cheap shots. It's really all about the storytelling and the tension. And I think that's creepier to me than anything else. If you can make me scared with the story, and I'm like, I don't want to know what's going to happen next because I just don't want to know. That's just what really gets me. And it's a good movie in general.
Yeah, that was one where I just saw a couple pictures from and I was like, nah.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to do this.
Yeah. I've watched it once. It's just like a one and done, like, nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best ones are just a one and done, I've noticed.
Yeah, like you said, you mentioned The Invitation and Green Room, which is also where I kind of set how much I can handle.
Yeah.
Because I loved those films. And they were like both in my top 10 of that given year. But man, I've never watched them again.
No, can't.
I'm certainly not going to. And I had a prep for both. Like, I was spoiled immensely and I still got scared.
Yeah.
So like, I had a hard time with mine because like I think technically the scariest film I've ever seen is The Thing in terms of like grossness, but I was tricked into that and I was drunk, so I can't really scale it well. And then I've seen 5 minutes of a film that would have been the scariest film I've ever saw if I didn't like walk out of the room. That High Tension film.
Oh, High Tension. Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a first date movie. So like I don't know what.
You're engaged?
Huh?
And you,
Yeah, it was a first date movie of a high school dalliance, and it was just like, set the tone. But yeah, but I think the movie that scared me the most, and this is actually embarrassing, I think Annihilation really did a number on me.
Oh no!
Annihilation did a number on me too. Don't even worry.
Oh my god, I was like shell shocked on the way home. I made my fiance check under the bed, and then like I just like, and, which is crazy, and I know that, and like, but I just was convinced the bear was there. And I think to me the thing that got me was the sound design, because usually if it's scary you can shut your eyes. And then I did, but I was in a screening, and then the fucking noises came out of its mouth, and I was like, I can't close my ears too because I'll look like a loser. So I heard the whole thing, and I just left, and I was like, I should never have seen that film, but it's one of my favorites of this year. But that one, I was just like, I spent days kind of like, what did I do to myself?
Yeah. And I think it's really the sound design and the score that really make that movie like what it is. Like not just the whole voices from the bear, which still gives me shivers to this day. But the score and the lack of, like when Oscar Isaac was just digging to that guy's stomach, it's like, oh my god.
Or even just like the unanswered questions, like the scene where Tessa Thompson's character just disappears into nature. Or there was a scene where I'm forgetting her name, the blonde one, but she turns around and she like doesn't have eyes. Oh, there were so many things that just like really picked apart at things that apparently freak me out, and now I know. But yeah, that's probably not. No, but sometimes I have that Helplessly Helping song, I think, that's in the playlist, this movie that like plays a number of times, and every time that comes on I'm just kind of like like it just brings back memories. But it is really good, and I guess that's the whole point of horror, is that it has to kind of stick. Apparently I also saw half of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is what I just got texted from over there.
That was my mom's first date movie.
That was one of our first date movies too, but it was half, and then I left right when he like picked him up and put her on the hook. I was like, nope. Done. Like, this is not fun for me anymore. But it wasn't from the start, but I was lying and trying to be cool. But yeah, so I think that's the most important thing for horror, from the small amount that I've gathered, is that it should linger, and it should be more than just flat out scares. And I think that's probably why The Thing didn't bother me as much, beyond the inebriation, was the fact that it was gross. It was just gross though, whereas Green Room or The Invitation, there's a lot of emotions there too, and that kind of digs deeper, which is funny that we're doing The Love Witch, because technically it's kind of a lighter romp, but they do so many things so specifically that I feel like it still has kind of hung on in a way that maybe a more like emotionally deep film would have. So I guess firstly, I wanted to ask what you guys thought of the film. AJ, I know you've seen this before because you wrote about it. So Yasmin, had you seen it before?
No, this is my first time. Actually, I've been wanting to see it, but never really got around to it. And I liked it. Like I said, it was not at all what I was expecting. Yeah, like I knew it was like filmed in Technicolor and kind of had the 1960s vibe to it. But I thought it was actually going to be like, an actual horror movie. Not that I'm saying that it's not a horror movie, but I didn't realize that how many like feminist things was going to like focus on, or like kind of how feminist in theory and, in execution it was going to be. Also, I found the main character insufferable. I don't know if we're supposed to find her insufferable, but I couldn't stand her.
I think I definitely think we weren't supposed to find her likable, but I think it was supposed to be like that she was a product of what society thought women wanted, like manifested, and then because it's too strong, like just ends up being killing men. But I definitely didn't love her, but I thought the actress was so charming.
Yeah.
And like so specific that like I was able to kind of push past not loving her. But in all honesty, I thought all the characters were insufferable. So luckily it was made super well. But I liked it too. And I thought I had a really good idea of what it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be a lot darker. I didn't expect it to be so funny. Like I laughed out loud a lot. And a lot of the, like when she just like deadpans, what a pussy. Like I started laughing so hard because I just wasn't expecting it. And it was so like well timed just to hear him like wailing in the background. But yeah, so I just thought it was really, really clever, really funny. And I liked watching it. Like there were so many details, and even just reading at the start that like she had such a hand in making the whole thing. It made it so interesting to watch because it was clearly like such a homemade passion project for such a weird story.
Yeah.
AJ, so did you see this the year it was released, or did you see it recently?
I saw it this year. Okay. I saw it earlier this year. I watched it. I had known about it. It was like on my radar, and everybody was recommending it to me. And then I finally watched it. I think in like March or April, so it was a while ago. And I didn't really know what to expect going in either. And I thought it was going to be very like hyper feminine, like, you know, that whole aesthetic built up in the beginning. And then I thought it was going to switch and just turn really, really dark.
Yeah.
But I think what I liked about it the most, and you touched on this, and I think it's what I like about all female directed horror films, is that it's not just like horror, it's everything else. And I mentioned this in what I wrote about it a while ago. The fact that it is an exploration of like what it means to be a woman in a society built by men, where when you're forced, I mean, she's not forced to do it, but it's like you get that sense of, you know, she's doing it because she needs it. She needs it, air quotes.
Yeah. Well, she's definitely a product.
Yeah, she is of a man's world. And yeah, it's really amazing to watch, like from a visual standpoint. And it's like, it's sexy, it's pink, and it's girly, and also she's killing people. And I just like that juxtaposition.
And I like that, and it's such a silly detail, but I feel like if it had been directed by a dude, and I feel like that's a sentence that could have just been the name of the podcast. If it was directed by a dude, here's where they would have fucked up. But I think the fact even that she is so overtly stereotypically feminine, down to like the smallest details, like that would have been a joke. You know, like it would have been the punchline to her character is that she's a witch and she does these things, but also, oh, isn't it funny she loves pink? Whereas here, it's just a character trait. And it actually makes her more intimidating in a sense because you have this kind of ruse of who she is. But I loved that. I loved that it embraced the femininity of the world and of the character and let it like bleed through the screen so that it wasn't just she's like this. It's the entire world is made in Technicolor down to the way it's filmed. And I mean, I know some people are more like technologically savvy or they have more of a film background in this sense, but I had to read. I knew there was something different with the way it was shot, but I read that it was one of the last films to cut an original camera negative on 35 millimeter film. So does that quote unquote old timey feel, you know? Did the effect really get to you guys quickly or did it put you off? Because I found that that's one of the things that made me so drawn to it. And I think without it, I don't know if the film would have landed the same way that it did. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think that really helped it a lot. I feel like if it was done in any other way, I feel like it would have been a little bit more forgettable. And it was making fun of the 60s film. It was making fun of camp. It was making fun of the femme fatale or the women characters like back then. And it was being kind of set in that time. It felt like it was being set in that time period. And I feel like if it was doing it at any other time or did it without that 35 millimeter film, it just kind of would have been like just any other film critiquing female characters, I think.
Yeah. No, I do too. And I feel like maybe even the glossiness of like a digital camera or something, or a more modern way of filmmaking, I just think it would have looked more shallow too. Like, I think the reason why the aesthetics works, the low budget works, like the very admittedly low budget works, is because of the way it was shot. And I think that takes a really savvy director to know that too. AJ, do you want to talk about it a little bit too? Just because the aesthetic is just, it's such a part of the film.
And I know we'll mention his name in a little bit, but the first time I saw any screenshot from it, I was like, this reminds me of like what Tarantino does with his films. And I know that it's not like the same. You can't compare it because, you know, the filmmaking techniques are different. But he often makes it look like you're watching the characters in a movie, like in another movie. If that makes sense. And I think, like a lot of his films, the aesthetic is what drives it home, and things kind of fall apart from there. I don't disagree with the fact that this particular method of filmmaking, it adds to it. I think that if it was shot differently, I still would have enjoyed it just for the story and the way it kind of subverts your expectations. But yeah, I do think that it adds a certain layer of fantasy to it. It kind of heightens the weirdness because it doesn't make it feel so much like reality.
It oddly makes it feel a bit like a fairy tale.
Yeah, fairy tale. That's what I was like going for.
Well, I just thought of it like a Hansel and Gretel style. Like, you know, it's very hypnotic, and like in the way that old like Grimm story fairy tales work, it's creepy. Like there's actual death and people are being maimed. Like, it's awful, but there's just this fairy tale atmosphere that makes it a little sweet too. And I wanted to jump around before we get more to the kind of why isn't Biller directing more, because we know why, but it's interesting too. But I thought about this later, but I thought the way the nudity was handled, and like really specifically the way menstruation was handled, where it was just like a thing, and even she was like, listen, women bleed, it's fine, and it was just like an aside to the camera, was so obviously a woman's touch.
Yeah.
Because God knows that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
It would have been done more of a joking matter and as a punchline. Instead, here it's like it's celebrated. It's kind of just like, you know, men have never even seen a used tampon like before.
Exactly.
You know, they're kind of just celebrating a woman's body in general. They're celebrating a woman's sexuality, which kind of makes me love that kind of like strip club scene when she's with her two colleagues there. And they're kind of talking about, you know, how a woman's body should be celebrated, and it was celebrated back in the olden times. And it's kind of just like, yeah, this is exactly what it should be like. And that, I just felt like that was a woman's storytelling in there.
Yeah. Like to the point where even like the used tampon is used as her like protective potion. Hold men off. It's like, you know, like there's a joke in there about how like they're so afraid that they won't even like come close to something they don't even know is what it is. But yeah, no, I just like, even the way the nudity was shot, like there's no denying that the lead actress is stunning. And like, funnily enough, is going to be in Tarantino's next film, which is kind of alarming. Yeah. Which is kind of weird when you think that he might have seen this and like this was his inspiration. Like he saw somebody who took after him and he was like, I must have it. But I don't know. It's just like, because there was a lot of nudity, but it never felt excessive. And I think it's because it was so frankly shot. Like it was never shot to like like it was never shot to be like specifically erotic in a male gazy way, but it was supposed to show that like this is what sex is and this is what like her seducing them are. So yeah, it was just another way that I appreciated the women's touch of it.
It's like if Playboy in the 70s was all of the art was directed by a woman. Like every photo shoot, every centerfold was just like, and like it's not Hugh Hefner, it's like, I don't know, Harriet Hefner.
Yeah.
Taking control of it. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
It's kind of true.
They really all felt like paintings and kind of like religious metaphors too. I felt like, you know, they were the subjects of like Botticelli paintings or Italian like Renaissance paintings, or even I kind of got like the whole like Eve feeling off of her a few times too.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that, especially with her in the way that they just like framed her so often. Especially since she always had something to kind of offer somebody, even like her female friend. It was like, do you want cake? Do you want this? And it was just a way to kind of show her trying to seduce everybody around her and overwhelming everyone. And then, so before we go into anything further, we kind of already touched on this, and maybe we don't need to touch on it further, but like I do think how women view the horror genre, and how on a bigger scale people of color view horror makes them almost better suited for it. Because the scariest horror are the monsters we know, right? And so I think reasons why The Invitation or Get Out or The Babadook work so well is because it's able to take these real life parables and then make them scarier than they are by putting them in like the horror prism. So I didn't know if you guys wanted to talk about how women are better suited, or is it just because like everyday life for us is sometimes a bit of a horror movie? You know, like
yeah, you can say this. You know, I've always this like white men don't have that much to fear. I mean, they do. You know,
no, they don't.
To fear, but I'm trying to be nice. But
Nice
they really don't have much to fear. Like,
well, because I was thinking today, like I was leaving the gym and I was just walking through the parking lot, and like this isn't going to help much for people who are just listening, but I was just like looking over my shoulder like constantly, and it was like 10 feet, but it was a dark, empty parking lot, and I was like, what the fuck, man? You know, it's like I can't even walk to my car without like having my keys in my hand like Wolverine, and it's just like, but it's normal. It's like I would never not do that. I would never not kind of peek in like the back seat of my car first to make sure. So it made me think about that in relation to horror and the fact that women aren't given as many opportunities, because it's like they have a lot of inspiration to draw from.
They really do. They really do. And we've noticed that, you know, women have the most compelling stories, but of course, you know, they don't make the box office hits, which is, you know, I don't know why, because they're clearly much better suited than like, you know, the 10th Insidious film, you know, that comes out.
Exactly.
But I think it's because like women's and people of color stories, because they're so real, they kind of focus more on the storytelling and lack of the jump scares that sells. Yeah. Which makes them more boring in quotes. But it's kind of frustrating because horror doesn't need to be, like as you said, just jump scares. It's scary in the dialogue. It's scary in the storytelling, which is why stuff like The Babadook and The Invitation are just like so good.
Well, who was it that said, wasn't it like John Carpenter or something that said The Babadook is the scariest film in the last decade or so? And it is, I mean, it is, I haven't seen it, but when we were doing our like best horror films of the last 25 years, I was the poor sap who had to pick out all the pictures, and I saw just a picture of the Babadook like laying under the bed, and it freaked me the fuck out. And it's like, that's a legitimately scary looking film that's about like a mother's grief, I think. Again, I haven't seen it, but you know, and it manages to be both. And I think maybe that's part of it, is that because it is such a merging of genres that maybe they think it's harder to market, but it's a reason why, of course, we want to see more diverse filmmaking across the board. Just really do. But in genre, in things like science fiction, I'd be especially interested because I do think there's this well of knowledge and empathy to kind of draw from for it. But yeah.
And I think in addition to kind of women having a keen sense of emotion and storytelling and all of the other things that can be tied into horror, I think we get when it's time to like press hard on the gas and when it's time to ease up. And it might just be men, they have this like innate sense of bravado, you know, like, oh, ours is the fairy, like, you know, in life, but also in filmmaking. And I think it's just like female directed horror movies are like cocktails and male directed horror movies are like shots. Like both have their place, but one is going to punch you in the face and the other one is going to have you like going back and back and back and back. And then you don't realize until it's way too late that you can't stand up, you can't feel your face, and you're like, I'm screwed.
That's an amazing metaphor.
It really is. And he just came up with it. What the fuck?
Girl,
that
like,
really works.
I was thinking like while you guys were talking, I was like, epiphany. This is what it is.
Oh, I'm gonna have to remember that to just like use as part of the article or tweet or something. That was really good. And true. I think most of men could be described as being a shot versus a cocktail. Like, you know, a punch in the face, bravado, unearned often. Like that shot isn't always good, but yeah, I think that's a good point too. And I think we've talked a lot on here about how empathy in particular is a huge part of what sets apart female filmmaking. And the fact that we could even empathize with this character, I think, is a good demonstration of it. But clearly, Biller is the star of this film. You know, she did everything. And with her, we see this familiar trend that we've talked about at length, where she demonstrates just how immensely talented she is, and she is not even at all getting the same work that her male contemporary, even though she's been compared to Tarantino with her style. One critic even said that she outdid what Tarantino often tries to do. So this is less of a why do we think this is happening? Because like I said, we know why it's happening. The world, Hollywood, is sexist, and it's a big, big hurdle we have to kind of just scramble over. But more so, has there been an announcement recently about a film being directed by a dude that you would think, oh, she'd be a good fit? But before we go to this, I think, AJ, you found something really interesting about the making of this film that could probably lend to why she's not getting as many opportunities.
Yes. So I was doing just some background like research on the making of the film. And Biller actually wrote on Twitter a while ago, I think it was in December of last year, that a lot of the crew was actually really hostile on set. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that they were like harassing her, but they were just making it really difficult for her to do her job. She wrote in a series of tweets, fun fact, most of the crew on the level with a few exceptions hated what we were shooting and did not even see the movie after it was done. It was so bad that during reshoots we had different ADs and they were appalled at what was going on. Your own crew is sabotaging you. Why? They asked. For example, a location assistant told me we had to stop shooting in the park because he couldn't get the right permit, but then lost his shit when a park ranger said, yes, we can get that for you. Or they were screaming at me saying that we had to leave a location early because the house owners wanted us gone, but I later found out the owners were totally fine with us being there. I've had the same thing on other films. Some crew members seem hell-bent on destroying you and the film to make sure it never gets in the can and will use direct subterfuge. IndieWire asked her why she thought this had happened, and she answered, I think it has something to do with being a female director.
What a nice way of putting it. You know, I think.
You know, she probably has the whole too difficult to work with label on her now, which is just so unfortunate to hear.
But I mean,
Especially-
she kept a really good attitude about it. Like, we'll link that. I'll link you guys
Yeah,
that
for
interview.
sure.
But yeah, she kept a very good attitude about it.
Well, because she has to, too. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing, because when men have had bad times on film sets, they've talked about it. Like, it's pretty infamous. Jake Gyllenhaal hated working with David Fincher. And he's gone on and on and on about it in the past. And it hasn't derailed his career at all, right? Or even look at the way people reacted to Robert Pattinson versus Kristen Stewart talking about how much they hated filming the Twilight series, or how ridiculous they felt it. Kristen Stewart was looked at as being an ungrateful bitch. Robert Pattinson was hilarious and super relatable. So I do think she probably kept a good attitude. I also think she's savvy enough to know that she has to. And that's kind of crummy, because it's like, God forbid she showed like the slightest bit of annoyance and she'd be labeled, like Yasmin said, as like hysterical or difficult to work with. But I do hope that it almost works to her advantage, though, the way she handled it, because she essentially did the whole thing. Like, again, in the opening credits, it showed things like costume design, set location. It's like she did every part of it, despite the fact that people were working against her because they didn't like a woman being in charge, or because they couldn't relate to the story because it was about a woman. God.
Good.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing you found, and I'm definitely going to link it in the post. And then, so is there a film recently that you guys could kind of think of that had a male director that you're like, she would have been much better suited? It's a hard one, and it's specific, and for some reason oh wait, no,
go. Firestarter.
Which one?
Stephen King's Firestarter. They did it in 1984 with Drew Barrymore, and it was a disaster. And it's about the little girl who,
Oh, it's like,
yeah, and
that makes sense to you.
Yeah,
I made hand gestures for people listening.
Yeah, it went to the filmmaker who did In the Fade, and of course Blumhouse is producing it, and obviously it's going to be, hopefully it'll be a good film. But I think I'm always an advocate for women telling stories about women, or in this case a young girl, and I think it would be obviously a big jump from this film, but I just thinking about like a female director telling a young girl's story, especially a young girl like Eleven from Stranger Things, before 11 from Stranger Things was a thing. Just imagining like that kind of story being told by a woman. I don't know. It just like, it brings me that happy, like that happy joy, but it obviously went to a male director and a male writer and a male-owned production company. So,
well, of course it did, because I just am used to being mad. So while you were talking, I thought of one, or thought of two, and then I like jumped ship. But my first one that I thought of was The Golden Compass, and I know it's kind of weird, but it's because she's kind of weird, and I want to see more women in sci-fi and fantasy. And if you're going to have somebody adapt that book, and I know it's being readapted and there's a much better crew on board for this version of it, but I always thought that film had such potential to just be like off the charts bizarre. And I think with her visual eye, it could have worked. But then it made me think of and I'm not saying this movie, no way, but couldn't she have done well with Suspiria?
Oh yeah, she would have been great with Suspiria.
Yeah, like just seeing the clips, and again, it's a female-led story, and you want to see women telling women's stories sometimes, especially when it's so involved with their bodies and how they're used, for art or for others. Yeah, I just maybe I would have thought, or to see it. I mean, granted, that one scene with her face being like pushed into the mirror has been enough for me, ever. But I would have definitely rooted it on from afar. And, Yeah, I think that movie, and I understand it's an adaptation, but the big thing with the original was the color, right? And she clearly loves color.
Clearly,
and she might have been able to bring a new vibrancy to it that wasn't just imitating the original. So, yeah, that's my pick, Suspiria, without having seen either films.
Well, those are good picks, though. But I have two. Definitely, when I was watching this film, I think that she would have done a great job of doing It Follows from, probably a couple years ago now.
2015, I think.
Yeah, because if there's any person who could do respectful STD horror with a woman in the forefront, it would be her. You know, it just kind of like, again, with that celebration of females' bodies. Like, I'm not saying that the guy who did it did a bad job, but it was just really obvious it was written by a man. Like you just know when a woman character is written by a man, you know, they lack the emotions, you know, they lack the drive beyond a male love interest. It's, you know, and I realized that if she did that and it would not only have like, you know, kind of like a comedic side to it, I think it would also kind of show more sympathy towards her, because I think a lot of the times the female character is being punished a lot in that film. And you know, surprise, surprise. and the second one, I think, is actually this new Halloween that just got released. Because I love Halloween. I love the first one. Haven't really seen any of the others in the franchise. But this one is kind of about Laurie's trauma and kind of how she's dealing with the aftermath of, you know, being, you know, hunted down by a psychotic killer when she was a teenager. And they kind of made it very much, you know, no big deal or anything.
That old thing.
That old thing. And they very much made her just like, you know, emotionless, being a survivalist, you know, not really showing any kind of feeling about how shook or how much PTSD that she has. And I think in order to really show that, a woman really should be writing the character, or should have at least been consulted on how Laurie Strode should have been handled. That was like one of my biggest problems.
And that was a big controversy with the new one, right? Because the filmmakers were like, yeah, we totally talked to Jamie Lee Curtis about it. And then Jamie Lee Curtis was like, no, they didn't. Like, they just lied because they wanted to look like there was more female involvement. It's like, at that point, just own up and say you messed up, you didn't do it. Yeah. And it shows. And I've seen a lot of interesting things with that one, where a lot of male critics were like, women are going to love this. And then I saw a lot of women critics being like, we hate this. Like, what are you talking about? And I think because a woman's trauma is technically the forefront of the story, they just assume that means women will like it. It's like, it still has to be done well. It's like people, or today's news of Lena Dunham doing something on the refugee crisis, and everybody's like, well, it's a woman. And we're like, but not, it's that one though.
It's like, doesn't mean we have to agree with the woman doing it. You know, trauma as a, you know, her trauma being the forefront of the story, great. Her being an emotionless, you know, person who's basically just like a female Bruce Willis or whatever, like,
the strong female character archetype.
The strong female character, exactly. Like, no, there should have been more going on with this.
Yeah. Another movie I will never see. So I will have to take your word for it.
It's on the nope list.
Huh?
It's on the nope list.
Yep. Especially the new one more than the old one, because I read all that junk that happens in the new one, and I was like, no way.
No.
You're not missing much. It's basically exactly like the first. There's not really any new ideas. Like, there's a couple, but not like anything that stands out.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So before we wrap it up with our ending question, was there anything else you guys wanted to add about the movie? Are you excited to see her in Tarantino's film, as long as he doesn't fetishize the fuck out of her?
You know, he probably thought she was being fetishized. It was like, yes, a woman can do it, so I can do it.
Right? And it's going to be in the Sharon Tate, Charles Manson film. So,
oh, great, even better.
That's going to be a disaster.
I was like,
she is. I think she's playing a real life character, so I imagine she will be.
I was kind of excited for that film, and then more and more casting announcements came out, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably. I don't even know if I'll see it. I didn't see The Hateful Eight. I've kind of worn down on trying to like Tarantino, and I've decided if it's something that just hasn't happened yet, it probably won't. But if I get like a screener, yeah, maybe I will.
If you want to see Charles Manson, just watch Bad Times at the El Royale. That's Chris Hemsworth is the best Charles Manson.
Well, that's the one I do want to see, actually. But not to say that I don't get why people like Tarantino. I do. I just don't. And I would rather see somebody like Anna Biller kind of shuffle her way into finding her. I was going to say voice. I didn't mean to. But what a douche move. But finding her vision or whatever, and like kind of finding her place in film, maybe in a less confident way than Tarantino does with his bravado. But I will be curious to see the actress in it, because I definitely am a fan of her now.
Is this her first role? I've never seen anyone in anything else. Like,
it's not her first role, but it's definitely her first significant role. Like, it was like 6 other IMDb credits, and then she gets Tarantino. So at least he'll help put her on the market.
Yeah, we can thank you for that,
which is good. But again, so if we're all wrapped up with that, what we do at the end recently, and this is kind of a selfish thing for me to get ideas too, but what have you guys been either reading, watching, listening to? You don't have to answer all 3. You clearly can, and it doesn't all have to be directed or made by women. It's more of just what are we as women interested in right now? And mine, because I paused it to do this, and my fiance was like, tell them to wait, because we were in the middle of a really good episode. And I was like, no, I have responsibilities. I'm neck deep in My Hero Academia.
Oh my God. Yes.
And I love it so much. I can't get over it. We're in season 2, and I love all the characters, and I love the little hothead angry dude. Whenever he yells, I'm like, this is a character who gets me. Because he's just angry all the time. And we're in the middle of like the trials. We're in the 3rd one, and he was just mind controlled. And we're in the middle of that episode.
So good. I love Bakugo. Oh my God. And
Bakugo is my favorite. I'm not gonna lie.
Is he the Fire and Ice kid?
That's Todoroki.
Okay, is Bakuro's the angry one?
Yes.
Yeah, he's angry.
I love him. And I also love the lead. I love that he's just this little dweeb who cries all the time. But yeah, so I'm watching that and loving it, and I'm already stressed at the idea of not having any more to binge, because with anime, it's like every couple of years. It's not because I don't like anime. I love anime. But series, it's like they're just so daunting, and I don't want to waste my time with one that turns out to be bad. So I've seen like Cowboy Bebop. I've seen Full Metal Alchemist, which like I loved. I watched some of Titan, and I was like, no, this is too much. And I started Yuri on Ice.
Oh, I love Yuri.
It's so fabulous. I love it so much. So it's just like whenever I find a new one though that I binge, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. So yeah, I'm loving it so much. And I might not be able to finish the episode afterwards because he went to bed. So I have to wait till tomorrow. But I'm so stoked that I found one. And then I've been listening to Boy Genius's album. That it's the collaboration between Julian Baker, Lucy Dacus, and Phoebe Bridgers. And I love it. I love it. I'm seeing them live next week, and I can't wait. So I'll link that just in our chat so you can listen to it, because I love it so much. But how about you two?
It's been all about Haunting a Hill House. It
the little horror show.
So good. You should watch it. I think you'd like it.
Isn't it scary?
Not as scary as you think it is. It's scary, but it's more about the family drama. The female characters are amazing in it. It's like Theodora. She plays one of the sisters who's just kind of like she's kind of a badass and the most like outspoken, and she's just like, there's just so much to her character. There's so much to all of the characters. Like, I didn't expect Mike Flanagan, who I wasn't a huge fan of beforehand, to make like characters this fleshed out and this good, and like I just can't stop watching it. Like my boyfriend's like, you have to wait till I come home. I'm like, no, I can't wait.
See, you can start actual fights.
Yeah, it does. Don't ever start a show with your significant other.
Exactly. Again, I have to wait till tomorrow to see how the next fight goes. But I've been told by a lot of people to watch that one. And like the fact is, I did watch Hannibal, which is scary.
Okay, Hannibal's a lot more.
So good.
And
Yeah,
it's
I love
artsy. And a romance, kind of. So there was like ways for me to get by with it. But yeah, no, it is on my list. How about that? I am going to get to it eventually. AJ, how about you?
I've been watching two different like ends of the spectrum in anime. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5 just came out, and I do a podcast with my boyfriend about it, and we just scream about JoJo. And
That's a fantastic podcast idea.
I know.
It's just,
With your significant other. Anime.
Anime. That's literally like he was at an event this past weekend. He's been gone for like 5 days, and the episodes come out on Fridays. And I'm like, we can't watch it. We can't record. I'm like, what am I gonna do?
Watch it secretly, and then watch it again and be equally surprised.
No, it was so difficult to not just like load up Crunchyroll and be like, I'm just gonna watch this episode. But
we got Crunchyroll, so maybe you're dedicated now.
I just started season 2, and I'm really into JoJo right now.
oh my god,
What is it called?
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Part 4 is the best part. Fight me about it. It is so good.
I think
Is that the Pompadour guy?
Yeah. Oh my god, yes. Josuke.
Josuke.
Well, I know what
And
I'm
Jotaro
watching
is
tonight
fat.
now.
His hat goes into his hair, and it's beautiful. And this new part, Golden Wind, it's set in Italy, and all the men dress very like femininely, and
Yes.
it's just weird and amazing, and yeah. But on the other end of the spectrum, I finally caught up on American Horror Story Apocalypse.
That is really on the opposite
It's
side.
very like, you never know what you're gonna get with me. I've actually only seen the first season and the third season of American Horror Story, so it's perfect that I'm watching this one now because it's just a crossover of the other two.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that the crossover
Yeah.
between 1 and 3?
So I'm just loving it because I'm like, I remember you, and I remember you, and I remember you.
Yeah, again, somebody was just talking to me about that one too. They were watching that and The Haunting on Hill House. But American Horror Story, it's Ryan Murphy, and I've been burned by him before. So I kind of stepped back and I'm like, I'm going to wait. Yes, Glee! Okay.
Oh,
I was a high schooler. I thought I was different, and I needed something to project myself onto. And then by the time I realized it was embarrassing, it was like too late to just completely draw out. So
No, I mean, I loved Glee too. I went to a live concert, so I'm not judging.
No.
I went to a live concert, so
look at how I covered my ass real quick, though, just in case you were. Which is still, I would say it's not the most unfair thing. I guess it was a little silly towards the end. But yeah, I've been burnt by shows, and I know that they have a tendency to kind of go like, derp after a couple seasons, but I have heard that this one's interesting. But it also sounds like the narrative of the latest season of The 100, which I was so in love with, and I'm kind of like, I can't compare it. No, it's so good. It's so good. Don't let the trailers or whatever fool you. Just get through the first 5 episodes of season 1. I would even argue just skip the first 5 episodes of season 1. You'll love it. But
I'm watching Riverdale. Speaking of CW,
that one I didn't watch any of season 2, and I'm just not going to. I'm going to jump into season
skip
3.
over it. It's hot garbage.
Yeah.
There's
I'm
too
done
much going on
watching.
in it.
I'm done binging seasons that I don't actually want to watch just to get to the good parts. Like I'm just not gonna. I can Wikipedia as good as anybody else. I'm not missing anything. But I know who to badger now for my anime recs. Because I don't trust dudes on this one either.
We just have a female podcast too.
Oh my god.
We should, because I freaking love anime.
Me too.
Yeah, I do. Again, I'm better with movies duh. And but whenever I get into the TV shows like Full Metal Alchemist, and I know everybody says this, so maybe it makes me sound like an anime noob, but like it's one of my favorite shows of all time. I love my angry characters. If you have an angry character like what's his face in this one and Ed, I'm pretty much sold. Like I love the little hotheads. Like who like are louder than they actually have ability to fight. Like I love it. Oh, there was a scene in this episode where it was like they're all like preparing in their different ways. And what's the name of the angry one again?
Bakugo.
And his like version of like it was like amping yourself up, and he's just like standing against the wall with his head on the wall, and I cracked up. It was so funny. But yeah, so I'm glad to know I can steal these shows from you guys as ideas. Just like now I know to steal like music recommendations from AJ because I have a tendency to love whatever she's listening to.
Hippocampus album is so good.
Which one?
Hippocampus Band.
Oh yeah,
so
it's
good.
so good. But and I knew immediately that I was gonna like it too, and I was like, oh, this is my style. So yeah, so I'll link things to everything we've wrecked. I'll link something to your anime podcast because that's so much fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, just link me anything that you guys want included. And we haven't yet discussed what our next episode is going to be about. It might be a bit of a crossover with another podcast. We're not sure yet. But we will be kind of brainstorming. So let us know what you think we should cover. And I think kind of doing more dives into individual films or genres is always a fun idea. AJ and Yasmin, where can we find you on the internet?
Twitter at Lady Smallbeard. I'm using Twitter a lot more often. Follow me, please.
Good.
And I'm on Twitter with a way less interesting handle, AJ_Caulfield.
Yeah, I will beat you with that one too because I don't even have an underscore. I'm just Allison AJ. We also have a Twitter that I have recently rediscovered and I'm trying to be more proactive with, and it's just Finding Her Voice. We're easy to find. Follow us. It's awesome. It's just going to be lady stuff all the time. And apparently now a lot of anime stuff too. And marrying the two is going to be great. So yeah, right. Just a little switch. So thank you guys all again for listening, and bye.